December 20th, 1944. The Ardennes. Snow fell sideways. Pines turned to gray ghosts in the fog. Engines somewhere in the distance coughed awake and then went quiet, like a giant clearing its throat before speaking. In a half-collapsed barn at the edge of a Belgian village, 4 Americans sat on ammo crates, around a radio that should not have been there. Corporal Eli Morgan rubbed a thumb across a dent in his headphones. He'd put that dent there with his helmet the first week in Normandy, when a German shell landed so close, the air turned liquid. Since then, every time the war got too loud, he found the dent with his thumb. It calmed him down. It told him he was still here. Outside, the wind took a breath and held it. Inside, the radio set ticked once, a tiny sound in a world full of big ones. Eli looked at the men around him. Sergeant O'Rourke, who could strip a radio down to copper and rebuild it in the time it took a cigarette to burn. Dale Whitaker, a kid from Ohio with hands that shook until the headphones went on, and then they were steady as a surgeon's. And Lieutenant Hale, too thin for the coat he wore, the kind of officer who asked questions instead of giving speeches. They weren't infantry, they weren't armored, they weren't supposed to be anywhere near a front line in winter. But lines had gone weird in the Ardennes, bent like wire under pressure. Now the 4 of them were here, with a box of tricks that had no business being in a barn. The wind let its breath go, and the barn filled with a sound that didn't belong to a barn. Morse code chatter. A German net. Short bursts, 3 stations. Somewhere east. Maybe more. Dale cocked his head, listening. He didn't close his eyes. He never closed his eyes. Traffic increase, he said softly. Frequency shift. New call sign in the net. O'Rourke glanced at Hale. They're moving. Hale didn't nod. He just looked at Eli. Eli found the dent in his headphones and breathed once, in and out, slow. They're staging for a push at the crossroads. They'll hit tonight if they've got fuel. You sure? Hale asked. No, Eli said. I'm only ever almost sure. Hale smiled like that was the right answer. What do we have? He asked. O'Rourke tapped the radio set like a mechanic pats a fender he doesn't trust. We have 1 transmitter we're not supposed to use this way, another we absolutely aren't supposed to be carrying forward, and an antenna that'll make a pretty lightning rod if God decides to notice us. What else? Hale said. An idea, Eli said. He said it like a man who had walked up to the edge of a bridge that wasn't there yet and felt an impulse to step anyway. He took off the headphones and set them down with care. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a notepad. The top page was a mess of pencil marks, call signs, net discipline notes, the way German operators clipped their dashes like they were trimming hedges, patterns, habits, the manners of men you never see but learn well enough to recognize in a crowded room. Ghost traffic, Eli said. O'Rourke snorted. We're not the Ghost Army, kid. I know, Eli said, but ghosts don't need a whole army. Ghosts just need one voice in the right place. Hale didn't move. Explain. Eli laid the pencil on the paper horizontally and rolled it with his fingers. They're building to a battalion push. Tanks up front. Fuel trucks in back. They've been probing for 2 days. Tonight they'll swing west, hit the crossroads, and cut supply to the airborne. The line collapses. That's the plan. And, Hale said, and they'll talk the whole way, Eli said, because they always talk. They tell each other when to step and where to breathe. They call for guides. They ask for permission. They repeat what the last guy just said, because repeating is the only thing that makes it feel real. He drew a small triangle on the page. We don't have to outshoot them. We just have to out-talk them for a little while, long enough to move them where they don't mean to go. Hale looked at the radio as if it might answer for itself. You're proposing we get on their net, imitate their traffic, and reorder a German attack. O'Rourke whistled low. That's a bigger court-martial than I've ever seen. Dale didn't say anything. He was staring at the notepad, his fingers tapping 3 short, 3 long, 3 short against his knee. The rhythm wasn't an SOS, it was nerves pretending to be music. Hale turned back to Eli. How sure are you we can sound like them? Eli blew a slow stream of breath into the cold barn air. I've been copying this battalion net since Monday. The net control string is Feldgrau 3. The forward guide uses a clipped 9 like an 8. The tank lead drags his dashes. He's tired. The fuel convoy has a guy who taps like he's late for a train. I can do all of them. Not perfect. Perfect gets you shot. I can do human. What do we tell them? O'Rourke said. Eli tapped the pencil on the triangle. We move their fuel. Silence filled the space between them for a second. Not an argument. Just a pause where each man tried the shape of the idea in his head. Hale broke the silence. Make your list. Eli wrote in small, neat letters that looked like they'd been taught by a stern teacher. We need call sign map, phrase book, cadence, antenna directional, power discipline, vol back. He tore the page off and handed it to Dale. Build me a phrase chain that sounds like a tired sergeant talking to a man he hates, but has to obey. Dale nodded, already writing. Eli turned to O'Rourke. You give me 10 minutes of directional gain that points straight at their ears and then disappears like it never happened. That'll cook the tube if I hold it too long, O'Rourke said. Then don't hold it too long, Eli said. Hale said nothing. He was watching Eli's face the way you watch a wire to see if it hums. Sir, Eli said softly, if I'm wrong, nothing happens. If I'm right, the tanks hit a road with no gas and sit there arguing with maps while it snows. We don't win the war, we just buy time. Enough for someone who shoots for a living to show up. Hale nodded once. You get one try. If it stinks, we cut, we run, and we never had this conversation. O'Rourke grinned without humor. That's my favorite kind of conversation. They went to work. The barn smelled like hay and metal, and an old cow that was gone but not forgotten. O'Rourke and Dale pulled the transmitter into pieces and then made a new thing out of it. A thing that was dangerous and delicate at the same time. Eli clipped a pencil behind his ear and put the headphones back on. The dent found his thumb like a magnet. German came and went in the set. Short bursts. Someone laughing that didn't sound like a laugh. A man with a cold reminding another man that fuel is holy and maps lie. Eli began to mimic them under his breath. The way the vowel in lynx could be stretched when you were cold. The way so fort could be a threat or a prayer, depending on who said it. He tried them on until they fit. Dale slid a small sheet of paper over. It had 4 lines on it. Fuel convoy, this is column 2. Halt at the Mill Road. New route to cover. Feldgrau 3 has priority. Confirm. Eli read it once. It smells American, he said. Dale nodded. I made it smell German. He rewrote it without the please, and without the complete words, and without the part of the sentence that makes English comfortable. Now it said, fuel convoy from column 2, halt at Mill Road, new route for Deckung, Feldgrau Dre, priority. Confirm. Eli smiled. That sounds like a man with a headache. Good, Dale said, because I've got one. O'Rourke reattached the last cable and wiped his hands on a rag that used to be a shirt. We can shoot a tight beam if we keep the barn wall between us and the snow. 2 minutes at a time. Then we go cold. I don't want to be a candle in a blackout. Hale took the corner of the rag and tied it around his wrist like a man who wanted to remember he'd done something he had no right to do. Say it, he told Eli. Then we're done. Eli nodded. He took a breath, found the dent, and leaned into the mic like he was about to tell a secret that needed to be believed. He listened to the net for 6 heartbeats. He waited for the tank lead to finish insulting a guide for missing a turn the guide couldn't possibly have seen in a blizzard. The net went quiet for a space that belonged to no one. Eli stepped into the space. Fuel convoy from column 2. Halt at Mill Road. New route for Deckung. Feldgrau Dry priority. Confirm. He made his voice flat and irritated. He dragged the dash like the tank lead. He clipped the 9 like the guide. He swallowed half a syllable like he had somewhere else to be. The net stayed quiet for 1 heartbeat. 2. On the 3rd, someone replied. Unclear, repeat. Eli did not repeat. Germans hated repeating. He changed the sentence by 1 word and made the silence look like their fault. Convoy from column 2, halt at Mill Road now. Route changed. Feldgrau Dry priority. Confirm immediately. There was a click. Then a voice that sounded like salt. Confirmed. Which crossroads for transfer? Eli glanced at Hale. Hale gave him nothing. It was Eli's sky now. He dragged the pencil across the paper, drew a quick map in his head, and chose a road he'd walked that morning that led nowhere fast. He kept his voice short. Pinned crossroads at Timber Yard, send half trucks east. Tanks continue to waiting point. The voice came back. That is against previous instruction from... And then the voice shut itself off like it had been slapped. Another voice, colder, took its place. Orders stand. Out. O'Rourke reached for the switch. Eli put a hand up. Wait, he whispered. He let 5 seconds pass, the kind of 5 that stretch thin like glass. Then he became the man with the cold who blessed fuel and cursed maps. Feldgrau Dry to column 2. Enemy patrol spotted on primary. Use Timber Yard route. Confirm convoy split. A third voice, nervous, came in like a boy talking to his father from far away. Split confirmed. Tanks continue. Fuel halting. Awaiting guide at timber yard. O'Rourke killed the transmitter with a flick that sounded like salvation. The barn felt enormous. It felt like a church after a prayer where nobody clapped. Hale exhaled slowly. "If we're wrong," he said, "we just sent men into a ditch." "If we're wrong, they'd find the ditch without us," Eli said. "We just gave them a name for it." Dale took off his headphones and pinched the bridge of his nose like a man who had read too much fine print. "They sounded tired," he said. "They are," Eli said. "Good." They waited. Waiting is a science. It has rules. Don't talk about what you can't change. Don't listen to your own blood. Count something real until your brain forgets to be scared. They counted the way the wind found the cracks in the barn wall. They counted the time it took for a stove ember to die and another to take its place. They counted the distance between lightning and thunder, even though there was no lightning and there was no thunder. And only children do that anyway. 20 minutes later, the net lit up like someone had kicked a nest. Confusion? Complaint? A guide who was not where he was supposed to be? A truck stuck at a turn that wasn't wide enough for a truck? A lieutenant who discovered that waiting points move in snow even when they don't? Hale put a hand on the radio like it might leap away. "Again?" he said quietly. Eli shook his head. "Let them argue with themselves. If we talk now, we make the lie too neat. Real lies are messy." O'Rourke scratched under his cap. "You're good at this." "I had a mother who hated excuses," Eli said. The net argued for 16 minutes that felt like a holiday and a funeral at the same time. In the confusion, someone asked for fuel forward. Someone else pointed out no fuel was forward. Someone tried to be brave and got chewed up by a captain whose bravery was elsewhere. "Now," Eli murmured. He leaned into the mic and came back as the voice with salt. "Column 2, to all units. Hold. Artillery on primary. Feldgrau Dre is rerouting guide. Maintain radio silence until orders. Out." He clicked off before anyone could answer. He smiled without teeth. In the distance, under the weather, engines coughed and died. The forest absorbed the sound like a secret it would keep. Hale rubbed at the rag tied to his wrist. "How long did we buy?" "An hour," Eli said. "Maybe 2? Long enough for someone to put a bazooka in a fence line that wasn't ready or for a roadblock to grow teeth." He didn't say what else was long enough for men to live who would not have, or long enough for men to die a county over where he'd never see them. Snow thickened. Afternoon stumbled toward night. When darkness came, it came quick. The Ardennes has a way of turning day into a rumor. Hale told them to sleep in shifts. Nobody slept. Around midnight, the net got loud again. Eli listened to men he would never meet say things he knew they would regret. He heard a tank lead, confess to an empty road. He heard a fuel chief talk about maps like they were a disease. He did not speak. He didn't have to. Lies have a half-life. You only need to give them a little push. At 2 a.m, a familiar voice, the one that dragged dashes like a man dragging a sled, said a sentence Eli had been waiting to hear. "We cannot proceed without fuel." Silence followed. Not the kind the air makes, the kind men make when the thing they won't say is standing behind them, with its hand on their shoulder. When dawn came, a gray wash over white ground, the crossroads to the west still belonged to men in bad coats, with rifles and bad coffee, and a belief that roads were worth dying for. A staff car came with a major in it who had shoulders that wanted to be a general's. He asked questions that sounded like accusations. Hale let him ask. When the major ran out of accusations, Hale gave him facts. He did not mention ghost traffic. He did not say the words imitation or deception or we crawled inside their conversation and moved furniture. He said only, we intercepted, we analyzed, we reported. He did not look at Eli when he said any of it. The major left with a face that said, there would be forms. There are always forms. That afternoon, an infantry captain whose men had held the western road with hands and sandbags brought a thermos and 4 tin cups to the barn. He poured the coffee like a man performing a sacrament, and he said, we heard them idling in the trees all night. We kept waiting for the hammer. It never dropped. He didn't ask why. He didn't want to know a thing he might one day have to deny he'd heard. He took his cup back and nodded. Next time you boys need a fence line, he said, you come find me. 2 days later, the German push in that sector turned, not because radios had outwitted tanks, but because tanks without gas fight like men underwater. The push found another road, another fight, another story to tell. One where other men did other impossible things. For a little while, in a corner of the Ardennes, no one bothered to name. A lie big enough to be useful stayed true long enough to matter. It isn't a heroic story, not the way posters want them. Nobody charged a hill. Nobody put a flag in the snow. Nobody played a trumpet. A boy from Ohio wrote a sentence that hurt to read because it wasn't the way he'd been taught to write. A sergeant wired an antenna that made light without light. A lieutenant nodded at the right moment. And a corporal who used to fix broken radios for farmers in Kansas did a trick with a voice. A week later, someone from division came with a car and asked Hale for his men. They weren't in trouble, the someone said. They were going somewhere with more radios and less snow, and a word none of them had heard before. Specialist. Pack your kit, Hale told them. Bring your notebooks. What do we tell them we did? Dale asked. The truth, Hale said, and then he smiled like a man who knows how the world really works. But not all of it. They rode in the back of the car and didn't talk. Eli watched the road go by and tried to imagine where the fuel trucks had ended up, what they'd said to each other when the maps ran out. He didn't like the way the imagining felt. He took his notepad out and turned a page. He drew a triangle, and then a circle, and then a single straight line. Through them both, he wrote 4 words under it. Move the wrong thing. He didn't mean it like it sounded. He meant move the thing the other man thinks is solid. Move the assumption, move the schedule, move the voice that says go when the road says wait. In March of the next year, after the snow had given up and the world had color again, Eli stood in a classroom with a blackboard and 20 men and said sentences that he had no business knowing. He said nets are habits. He said cadence is a fingerprint. He said never be perfect when you imitate. Perfection is suspicious. He said if you have to choose between a beautiful lie and an ugly true detail, choose the ugly truth. It buys belief. A colonel who didn't like magic but liked results nodded along like the words made sense. And after that, the words lived in a manual no one admitted existed. None of that mattered to the men at the crossroads in December. What mattered to them was coffee and ammunition and a road that stayed friendly until breakfast. Years later, long after the war had been put away on a shelf high enough to call it safe, someone found a sheet of paper in a file that didn't belong to anyone. The sheet had 4 lines on it, written in a neat hand that had learned letters from a stern teacher. It said, "Fuel convoy from column 2, halt at Mill Road, new route for Deckung, Feldgrau dry, priority, confirm," and in a different pencil below it, someone had written 2 more words in English. It worked. Eli didn't keep the paper. He didn't keep much of anything. He kept the headphones with the dent until they broke, and then he kept the dent in his thumb where he'd learned to find it in the dark. He went home to a small job in a big country and talked to radios that only needed to tell farmers when the weather changed. When someone asked him what he did in the war, he said, "I listened." If pushed, he would add, "Sometimes I answered." He did not say, "I told a story with just enough truth in it to be believed by a man who needed to believe it." He did not say, "I put a road in the wrong place for a night and bought a morning." He did not say, "I lied," because he didn't think of it that way. He thought of it as a kind of engineering. Bridges aren't only the steel you see, they're the math you trust. In the Ardennes, on a night when trees looked like bones and snow made cowards of maps, 4 men built a bridge out of sound. It didn't carry tanks. It carried time. It carried it just far enough. You can make a doctrine out of that if you like. You can put it in a manual. You can call it spoofing or deception or operational art. You can give it a number and a cover sheet and a stamp. But if you want the truth, the real, human, ugly, useful truth, it's simpler. It's a voice that sounds like the voice you've been taught to obey, telling you to wait where the road is wrong. It's a man in a barn who knows you're tired and uses it. It's a captain looking the other way because the right thing and the true thing are not on speaking terms. It's 1 minute longer for the people who needed it. A German battalion never knew who moved them that night. If any of them told the story after the war, they probably said it was a traffic jam or a bad guide or a road that lied. They weren't wrong. If any of them guessed it was a voice that did it, I hope they forgave themselves. The war is full of stories where courage is loud and steel is honest. This isn't one of them. This is a story where courage whispers, steel obeys the wrong sentence, and honesty is a luxury you pay for later. It still counts. If you've ever been in a room where everyone is waiting for permission to do the obvious thing that will save them if they do it now, you know the feeling. Your hand hovers over the switch. You look at the door. You tell yourself that someone somewhere knows better than you. You tell yourself that silence is wisdom. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's just snow. On those nights, you don't need heroics. You need a sentence that sounds like authority and buys you a little time. You need a lie that bows to a greater truth. You need ghost traffic. And you need a man who can say it like he means it. This is Forgotten Fronts.